The rain came down in relentless sheets that morning, streaking the tall glass windows of Carter Industries like silent tears. Inside the marble-floored lobby, a janitor in a faded blue uniform worked quietly, his mop gliding across the gleaming surface. His name was Daniel Reed. To most, he was invisible, a man who cleaned the footprints of others who lived in the shadows of success. But to the small girl waiting near the reception desk, clutching a worn teddy bear, he was everything. Her bright brown eyes followed her father's every move with pride, unaware of how the world saw him. To her, he wasn't a janitor. He was her hero. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and judging people by their hearts, not their titles, please take a moment to like this video. Share it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your support helps more people see stories that remind us what truly matters in life. That morning, Daniel was late. His daughter, Emily, had woken up with a cough, and he'd spent extra time making sure she was warm before dropping her off at school. But the school's heater had broken, and she'd begged him to stay for the morning assembly. So he did, knowing it might cost him. When he finally arrived at the company, soaked and tired, the CEO himself was already in the lobby, inspecting the floors before a group of investors arrived. Victor Carter, the man who had built the empire that bore his name, was known for his sharp mind, iron discipline, and an even sharper tongue. Daniel hurried to his work, avoiding eye contact. But fate, cruel as ever, decided to test him. His daughter's school had called to say Emily wasn't feeling well, and since he had no one else, he brought her quietly to the office, hoping she could sit near him while he finished his shift. The little girl sat quietly on a chair, watching him mop, humming softly to herself. But when the CEO spotted her, his expression turned to one of irritation. Victor approached, his polished shoes clicking against the marble. "What's this?" he asked sharply, his voice cutting through the air. "We're running a corporation, not a daycare." Daniel straightened, gripping the mop handle nervously. "I'm sorry, sir. My daughter's school closed early. She's sick. I didn't have anyone to watch her." The CEO sneered. "So you thought bringing her here to my company was a good idea?" His gaze shifted to the small girl, who shrank back slightly. "Children don't belong in places of work. If you can't manage your personal life, maybe you don't belong here either." The words stung like acid, but Daniel said nothing. He bowed his head and murmured an apology. Emily, sensing her father's shame, stood up and took his hand. "Don't be mad at my daddy," she whispered timidly. "He works really hard." The CEO laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "I'm sure he does. Mopping floors must be exhausting." The nearby employees chuckled nervously, trying to blend into the background. Daniel's face burned with humiliation. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but pride and necessity kept him silent. That evening, after the investors left, Daniel stayed late. He scrubbed every inch of the lobby until the tiles gleamed like mirrors. Emily had fallen asleep on a bench, her tiny head resting on her teddy bear. The building was quiet, save for the hum of the air vents and the faint rhythm of Daniel's mop against the floor. He paused for a moment, looking at his reflection in the polished glass doors. A soldier once stared back at him, not a janitor. Years ago, he had worn a different kind of uniform. He had served his country overseas, led men through chaos, and nearly lost his life saving others. The long scar across his chest, hidden beneath his shirt, was a reminder of the day everything changed. He had been medically discharged after an explosion left him badly injured. His wife, unable to handle the weight of it all, left soon after, leaving him alone with a newborn baby. He traded medals for mops, honor for survival. Every day since then had been a fight, to feed his daughter, to keep a roof over her head, to remind himself he still had worth. But tonight, after the humiliation, he wondered how much longer he could keep pretending he didn't feel broken. The next morning, the company hosted a charity event. Ironically, for veterans. Daniel was assigned to clean the ballroom before and after. As guests began arriving in suits and gowns, he kept his distance, quietly setting up in the back. Emily was home with a neighbor this time. Music played softly, laughter filled the air, and the CEO stood at the center of it all, shaking hands with politicians and donors. The irony was unbearable. Daniel could almost laugh. This man who mocked him now giving speeches about honoring heroes. As the night went on, a presentation began. The CEO introduced a guest of honor, someone who had once saved lives in combat but never sought recognition. "Tonight," Victor said grandly, We celebrate bravery, sacrifice, and leadership." He turned toward the side of the stage, expecting the veteran to appear. But the man wasn't there yet. One of the organizers rushed over to the CEO and whispered something. The veteran had been delayed. The event had to continue without him for now. To fill the gap, Victor decided to make it interactive. "If any veteran is present tonight," he announced, "please stand and let us thank you." The room fell silent. No one moved. Until, slowly, from the shadows near the back, a figure stood. Daniel. His mop rested against the wall as he stepped forward hesitantly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The CEO blinked, momentarily stunned. "You?" he asked under his breath, almost laughing. "You're a veteran?" Daniel nodded, not out of pride, but quiet truth. Victor smirked. "Well, I suppose cleaning floors isn't too different from cleaning up battlefields, is it?" Laughter broke out again. Daniel didn't respond, but something inside him shifted. A fire long buried beneath years of humility. Without a word, he began unbuttoning the top of his uniform shirt. Gasps filled the room as the faint lighting caught the jagged scar running diagonally across his chest, the one carved deep by shrapnel years ago. "That's where it hit," he said softly. "A grenade. I pulled 2 men out before I blacked out. They survived. I didn't wake up for 3 weeks." The laughter died instantly. Even the music seemed to hold its breath. Victor's expression changed from mockery to disbelief, then to something resembling guilt. Daniel continued, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I don't talk about it because it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is taking care of my daughter. She's the reason I'm still standing." His gaze swept across the crowd, every pair of eyes fixed on him. "We all have scars. Some you can see, some you can't. But none of them define what we're worth." The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. The CEO stood frozen, his face pale. When Daniel turned to leave, Victor reached out, his voice breaking. "Wait." For once, there was no arrogance in his tone. I didn't know." Daniel looked at him, his eyes calm but tired. "You didn't need to," he said quietly. "You just needed to be kind." That moment haunted Victor for days. He couldn't shake the image of the scar, or the words spoken with such quiet strength. He began asking around about Daniel, learning how he lived, how he worked extra shifts to afford his daughter's medicine, how he never complained. Guilt gnawed at him until he decided to act. A week later, Daniel was called to the CEO's office. Nervous, he expected to be reprimanded again. Instead, Victor stood up as he entered. "Mr. Reed," he began, "I owe you an apology." He went on to explain that after learning of Daniel's past, he had spoken with the board. They were launching a new program to hire and train veterans for management roles, and he wanted Daniel to help lead it. "You've led men before," Victor said sincerely. "Now I want you to lead again." Daniel was speechless. For the first time in years, someone had looked beyond his uniform. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back. "Thank you, sir," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. When he left the office that day, Emily was waiting outside. She ran up to him, her eyes full of curiosity. "Daddy, why are you smiling?" He lifted her into his arms and said softly, "Because someone finally saw who I really am." That night, for the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't feel invisible. He looked at the framed photograph on his small apartment wall, him in his army uniform holding a newborn baby, and whispered, "We made it, kiddo." Months passed. Daniel's life began to change. He traded his mop for a desk, but he never forgot where he came from. He still stopped to talk to janitors, security guards, and interns, the ones everyone else ignored. And every morning he arrived early, walking through the lobby he once cleaned, greeting each person with a smile. Victor Carter, too, changed. He visited the Veteran Outreach Center regularly, funding scholarships for families of fallen soldiers. Sometimes he and Daniel would talk, 2 men who had once stood on opposite sides of pride, now bound by respect. Years later, at another company event, Emily, now grown, stood beside her father. She was giving a speech about resilience and gratitude, her voice steady and confident. Victor watched from the front row, proud of the man he had once mocked and the young woman who had grown up under his company's roof. When the applause filled the room again, Daniel's eyes glistened. He looked down at the faint scar peeking from beneath his collar and smiled. "Some scars," he whispered, "don't break you. They remind you you've survived. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Share it with someone who believes in the power of humility and kindness, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us of our shared humanity. And before you go, I want you to comment below. Kindness can change everything, because sometimes it really does.